We were supposed to leave the island at 6:45 p.m. The ferry never came. At first, no one thought much of it. Blackwater Island wasn't a tourist hotspot. It was one of those small, wooded islands about 40 minutes off the mainland, the kind people visit for the quiet beaches and hiking trails. There were only about 50 permanent residents and maybe 20 visitors during the summer. My girlfriend, Emma, and I had rented a small cabin for the weekend. No Wi-Fi, weak cell service, just trees, ocean air, and silence. The ferry ran 3 times a day, morning, midday, evening. If you missed the last one, you stayed the night. We hadn't missed it. We were standing at the dock 10 minutes early. There were 5 other people waiting too. At 6:50 p.m., someone joked that it was probably running late. At 7:05 p.m., no one was laughing. The ocean was calm. Too calm. You could see nearly a mile out into open water. No lights, no engine noise, nothing. One of the locals, an older man in a faded blue jacket, muttered, "That's not normal." That was the first time I felt something shift. We walked back toward the small harbor office, a wooden shack near the dock where ferry schedules were posted. The sign still read, 6:45 p.m. final departure. A teenage girl who worked there stood behind the counter looking confused. "The boat left the mainland," she said. "I heard it over the radio." "So where is it?" Emma asked. The girl hesitated. "There was some interference." Interference on a clear night? By 8 p.m., the dock was empty except for us and the older man. The others had walked back into town. The island got dark quickly. There were only a few streetlights scattered along the dirt road leading to the cabins. Most houses had their porch lights on, but it felt different, quieter than it should have been. You know that feeling when you realize you're listening for something? That's what it was like. The absence of sound felt intentional. When we got back to our cabin, the power was out. At first, I thought it was just our place, but looking across the trees, I noticed something strange. Most of the island was dark. No porch lights, no windows glowing, nothing. Mine, too. Dead silence. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at our cabin door. 3 slow knocks, not loud, just deliberate. I remember the way my chest tightened instantly. No one on the island knew us. We hadn't spoken to anyone besides the ferry girl and the man at the dock. I opened the door. The older man in the blue jacket stood there. Up close, he looked tired. "You shouldn't have come this weekend," he said. I almost laughed because it sounded ridiculous. "What do you mean?" He glanced past me into the dark cabin. "It's not the ferry that worries me." That was when I felt the first real spike of fear. He didn't explain, just said, "If you hear anything outside tonight, don't open the door." Then he walked back into the trees. Not toward the road, into the trees. At 10:30 p.m., we heard the first sound. It came from the direction of the beach, metal scraping, like something dragging across rocks. Emma grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" It stopped abruptly. Then it started again, closer. I went to the window. The shoreline was about 30 yards from our cabin. The moon was bright enough to see the water clearly, and that's when I saw it. A boat, a small ferry-sized vessel, sitting motionless near the shore. No lights, no engine noise, just drifting. The shape looked identical to the mainland ferry, but something was wrong. It was facing the wrong direction, as if it had approached backward. Emma whispered, "Is that?" Before she could finish, I saw movement on the deck. Not clear movement, just figures standing too still, watching the island. Then I realized something that made my stomach drop. No one else on the island had lights on. No one else was reacting. It was like we were the only ones awake, or the only ones who weren't expecting it. Around midnight, the scraping sound came again, this time directly outside our cabin. Something brushed against the side wall,
Slowly, deliberately, Emma started crying quietly. Not hysterical, just that controlled panic breathing. I forced myself not to look out the window. The old man's words kept repeating in my head. If you hear anything outside tonight, don't open the door. At 12:17 a.m., there was another knock. This time, softer, almost polite. I froze. Emma shook her head violently. We stayed silent. After a few seconds, a voice spoke. Calm, familiar. "Ferries here?" It was the teenage girl from the harbor office. Her exact voice, same tone, same softness, but it was wrong, because her house was on the other side of the island, and the ferry wasn't at the dock, it was at the beach. "Ferries here," the voice repeated, and then it added, "You're the only ones left." That sentence felt surgical, precise, like it was designed to make us open the door. The doorknob turned slowly, just once, then stopped. We hadn't locked it earlier. I don't remember doing it, but somehow it didn't open. The scraping sound started again, circling the cabin. I don't know how long we sat there. An hour, maybe more. The sounds eventually faded. No footsteps, no voices, just ocean. At sunrise, the island looked normal again. Porch lights on, smoke from chimneys, birds loud and obnoxious. We walked back to the dock. The ferry was there, docked perfectly. Crew unloading supplies, everything ordinary. I asked the ferry captain what happened last night. He frowned. "What do you mean? You didn't come?" "Yes, we did," he said casually. "Left right on schedule." He pointed toward the island. "We dropped off 12 passengers."
There were no new people on the island. I checked. The harbor office girl was there. I asked her if she'd come to our cabin. She looked genuinely confused. I was home all night. Then she said something that still messes with me. The ferry never stops at the beach. Before boarding, I looked back toward the tree line near our cabin. The older man in the blue jacket was standing there, watching. He didn't wave, he didn't move. He just stood there, like he knew we were leaving, like he knew we wouldn't be back. 3 months later, I looked up Blackwater Island online. I couldn't find it. No tourism site, no ferry schedule, no rental listings, nothing. Even the map looked different, like that patch of water had always been empty. But I know what I saw. I know what knocked on that door. And sometimes, when I'm near the ocean at night, I hear it again, metal scraping across rocks, closer each time.
The job paid too much. That should have been the first red flag. I found it on a private listing site. Temporary caretaker needed for a private island property off the Florida coast. 2 weeks. Owner out of the country. Responsibilities: basic maintenance, checking generators, making sure no one trespasses. Pay: $8,000. No interview, just a phone call. The owner's assistant told me the island was called Marrow Key. "There's only one house," she said. "You'll be completely alone." I didn't think much of it. I should have. The boat dropped me off just before sunset. The house sat on the highest part of the island, modern, concrete, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean. It didn't look abandoned. It looked staged, like no one actually lived there. Inside, everything was immaculate. Too immaculate. No personal photos, no clothes in closets, no dishes in the sink, just furniture and silence. The first night was peaceful. Ocean breeze, no traffic, no noise. But around 1:14 a.m., the security monitor in the living room flickered.
The property had 8 exterior cameras, 1 pointed at the dock, 1 at the tree line, 1 at the generator shed. Camera 3 facing the beach went static, then came back, then static again. I assumed it was interference from the wind until I rewound the footage. At 1:13 a.m., the camera clearly showed the shoreline, empty. At 1:14 a.m., for one single frame, something was standing near the water. Not walking, not moving, just present. The next frame was static. When the feed returned, the shoreline was empty again. I zoomed in. The figure was too far to identify, but it wasn't driftwood. It wasn't a shadow. It was upright, human height. The next morning, I checked the beach. No footprints, nothing disturbed, smooth sand. I told myself it was compression glitching, camera artifacts, brain filling in details that weren't there. That explanation lasted until night 2.
At 2:32 a.m., all 8 cameras went black at the same time. Not static, black, for exactly 17 seconds. When they came back, one thing had changed. The dock rope. It was untied. My boat was still there, but the knot I'd tied personally was undone. Cleanly, neatly, like someone had been there. I walked the perimeter of the island with a flashlight. Nothing. No voices, no movement. Just wind through trees. On day 4, I noticed something I hadn't before. The island wasn't as small as I thought. From the dock, you could only see the main house and shoreline. But past the tree line, there was an overgrown path. I followed it. About 10 minutes in, I found a second structure. Not modern, old, wooden, half collapsed. An abandoned guest house, boarded windows, door hanging slightly open, and something carved into the porch beam. He doesn't stay inside. That sentence felt personal, like it wasn't meant for strangers. It was meant for whoever stayed in the main house. That night, I didn't sleep. At 3:07 a.m., I heard footsteps on gravel, slow, measured, circling the house. The cameras showed nothing, every angle empty, but the sound was undeniable. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. Then I heard it, a knock, not on the door, on the glass wall facing the ocean. 3 taps from outside. I forced myself to look. The cameras showed nothing, but the sound came again. 3 taps, directly in front of me.
The power cut out. Total darkness. The generator should have kicked in instantly. It didn't. The only light came from the moon reflecting off the ocean. And that's when I saw it. A silhouette, standing between me and the shoreline, inside the house. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't close. It wasn't moving. It was just standing in the living room, between the kitchen and the hallway, like it had always been there, watching. The lights came back on. Nothing there. No doors open, no broken glass, no alarms triggered. But the dock rope was untied again. The next morning, I called the assistant. She sounded calm, almost rehearsed. "Stay inside after midnight," she said. That was it. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Call the police." Just, "Stay inside after midnight." I asked about the guest house. She paused. There shouldn't be another structure. There was, and it wasn't new. On night 7, I decided to test something. At 11:55 p.m., I locked every door, closed every blind, turned off every light. Then I sat in the dark with the security monitors on. Midnight passed. Nothing. 12:30. Nothing. At 1:02 a.m., camera 3 flickered again. The beach. There was a boat, small, wooden, not mine, pulled halfway onto the sand, and someone standing beside it, looking directly at the camera.
This time, I didn't rewind. I ran. Out the front door, across the sand. The boat was there, real, weathered, old, but no one around it. And then I noticed something that made my legs feel weak. There were 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one leading from the boat and one leading toward the house. Only one set came back. I didn't stay the full 2 weeks. I left the next morning. Didn't even tell the assistant, just took the first boat back. A month later, I checked the listing again. Caretaker needed. Merrow Key. $8,000. Same description, same assistant, different phone number. Out of curiosity, I looked up Merrow Key on a nautical map. It doesn't exist. There's no island at those coordinates, just open water. But I have photos, I have video, and sometimes when I check the security app I forgot to delete, camera 3 still works. It's always night, and there's always someone standing at the shoreline.
We weren't supposed to be anywhere near it. There were 4 of us on the boat. Me, Ryan, Derek, and Lucas. We were heading back from a weekend fishing trip about 20 miles offshore. The weather report said clear skies. It lied. Around 5 p.m., the sky turned gray in less than 10 minutes. Wind picked up fast. Waves started slamming the side of the boat harder than they should have. Ryan tried calling it in over the radio. Static, then nothing. The GPS screen flickered once, then shut off. We drifted for hours. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. It was one of those storms where you can't tell if it's been 10 minutes or 2 hours. By the time the rain slowed, it was almost dark, and that's when we saw it. Land, about half a mile ahead. It wasn't on our route. It wasn't supposed to be there, but we were low on fuel and the boat had taken on water. We didn't really have a choice. We anchored near a rocky shoreline and waded through waist-deep water to reach it. The island was small, too small to be on a major chart. No dock, no structures visible, just trees and a narrow stretch of beach, and silence. Total silence. No birds, no insects, nothing. We decided to stay the night and leave at sunrise. Ryan and Derek gathered driftwood while Lucas and I checked the tree line. That's when I noticed something strange. There were footprints in the sand, not ours and not old. They were deep, recent, leading from the shoreline into the trees, but there was no boat. I told the others. Ryan shrugged it off. Probably fishermen. But fishermen don't leave without a boat, and the footprints only went one direction, into the island. None came back. We built a fire near the beach. As the sky went completely dark, something changed. The air felt heavy, like pressure building before a thunderclap. Lucas kept staring into the tree line. "Feels like we're being watched," he said. No one laughed. Around 11 p.m., we heard it. A single branch snap. Not near us, not far, just close enough to know it wasn't wind. Derek grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. Nothing moved, but something was there. You can feel when something is there, even if you can't see it. We decided to take turns staying awake. Ryan first, then me, then Derek. Lucas fell asleep fast, too fast. It must have been around 2 a.m. when I noticed the fire had burned low. Ryan was asleep beside me. I was supposed to wake Derek next. That's when I realized something was wrong. Lucas wasn't there. At first, I thought he'd gone to the shoreline, maybe to use the bathroom. I grabbed the flashlight and called his name. No response. I scanned the sand. There were fresh footprints,
leading away from the fire, toward the tree line. Just one set, barefoot. Lucas had taken off his shoes before sleeping. The footprints stopped about 10 feet into the trees. No scuffle marks, no drag marks, just stopped, like he'd vanished. I woke the others. We searched until sunrise. Nothing. No body, no signs of struggle. Just forest, dense and dark.
When the sun came up, we tried restarting the boat. It wouldn't turn over. The battery was dead, completely, even though it had worked fine the day before. Ryan swore. Derek just stared at the island. "I don't think we're alone here," he said quietly. Around mid-morning, we heard something from deeper inside the trees, a sound that made my skin crawl. Laughter. Low, human, but wrong, like someone imitating what laughter should sound like. It echoed briefly, then stopped. We didn't go back into the trees. We stayed near the shoreline. By afternoon, the tide had shifted strangely. The water had pulled back farther than normal, exposing rocks and seaweed and something else. A boat hull, half buried, old, splintered, like it had been there for years. We walked toward it carefully. The name painted on the side was faded but readable. It was Lucas's family boat, the one he'd owned years ago, the one that had sunk during a storm. He'd told us that story dozens of times, but that wreck was miles away from where it had gone down. That was when we heard footsteps behind us, slow, measured, matching our pace. But whenever we turned around, nothing, just trees. Snapped, Ryan started yelling into the forest, demanding whoever was there to come out. The laughter came again, closer this time, and then something stepped between the trees, not fully visible, just a shape, human height, standing unnaturally still, watching.
Derek ran, back toward the beach. Ryan followed. I hesitated 1 second too long, because in that second, the shape tilted its head, like it recognized me. We made it back to the shoreline, and that's when we saw something impossible. Our boat wasn't anchored anymore. It was pulled onto the sand, like someone had dragged it. No footprints around it, no rope marks. Just there, waiting. We didn't question it. We pushed it back into the water. By some miracle, the engine turned over. Fuel gauge showed half tank again, even though it had been nearly empty. As we pulled away, I looked back at the island. The tree line looked different, closer, like the island itself had shifted. And near the shoreline, I saw him, Lucas, standing still, watching us leave, barefoot, smiling. We turned the boat around immediately. He was gone. The shoreline was empty. The island looked smaller now, almost distant.
When we reached the mainland, we reported Lucas missing. Coast Guard searched the coordinates we gave. They found nothing. No island, no wreckage, just open water. A week later, Ryan called me. He'd been reviewing footage from his GoPro. There was a clip from the beach that night at 1:58 a.m. It showed the 4 of us sleeping by the fire. All 4. Lucas never left the frame, not once.
I don't know who followed those footprints. I don't know what stood between the trees. But sometimes, late at night, I get messages from an unknown number. No text, just a photo, a shoreline, and 4 sets of footprints leading into the trees.
The lighthouse wasn't supposed to be operational. That's what the harbor master told me. It had been automated years ago. No staff, no keeper, just a rotating beacon powered remotely from the mainland. But for 3 nights in a row, passing fishing boats reported something strange. The light wasn't rotating. It was fixed, pointed directly toward open water. And it wasn't the normal white beam. It was dim, yellow, like an old bulb. I took the job because I needed money. Temporary inspection work. 3 days. Check the electrical system, make sure no one had broken in. The island was small, nothing but rock, grass, and the lighthouse tower standing at the center. No houses, no docks except a rusted landing platform. When the supply boat dropped me off, the captain said one thing before leaving. If it turns off on its own, don't try to turn it back on. I laughed. He didn't. Inside, the lighthouse was clean, not dusty, not abandoned. Clean, like someone had been maintaining it. The spiral staircase echoed when I climbed, each step metallic, hollow. The control panel upstairs showed something odd. Power input, normal. Automation, online. Manual override, disabled. But the light outside wasn't rotating. It was fixed, facing north toward nothing but dark ocean. That night, I decided to watch it from the top balcony. The wind was strong, the sea violent below. At 12:11 a.m., the beam flickered once, then adjusted slightly. Not rotating, just shifting a few degrees, like someone nudging it. Then it stopped. At 12:14 a.m., I heard a knock, not on a door, from inside the tower walls. 3 slow taps, metal on metal. I froze. The sound repeated, lower this time, below my feet, inside the structure. I told myself it was temperature changes, old metal contracting. But at 1:03 a.m., I heard footsteps on the staircase, measured, slow, coming upward. There was no one else on the island. I stood at the top of the spiral and listened. Step, pause, step, pause. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it down. Nothing, but the sound continued until it stopped 1 level below me.
The beam outside shifted again, now pointing directly at the mainland, perfectly aligned, unmoving. The next morning, I checked the logbooks in a storage cabinet. There hadn't been a human keeper there for years, but there were fresh entries, dated 3 days ago. Same handwriting on every line. Light remains fixed. Do not realign. He stands where it points. The last line had been scratched over repeatedly. That night, I decided to test something. At 11:59 p.m., I manually forced the rotation system to reboot. The light began turning normally, full rotation, smooth, steady. I felt relieved until 12:07 a.m. The beam stopped, locked into position, pointing north again. Then I saw something I hadn't before. Far in the distance, out in open water, there was a second light, faint, standing at the exact spot where the lighthouse beam ended, as if reflecting it. But there was no other structure on the charts, no buoy, no oil rig, nothing. The knock came again, but this time it wasn't in the walls. It was behind me, on the glass door leading back into the tower. 3 slow taps. I turned slowly. The balcony was empty, the sea violent below. No one there. The footsteps started again, but this time they weren't climbing. They were descending from the top, behind me. I stepped back into the tower. The spiral staircase above me disappeared into darkness. The beam outside flickered again, and the second light in the ocean flickered too, in sync.
I don't know what made me do it, but I aimed the beam away from the ocean, toward the shoreline below the lighthouse. The moment it moved, the knocking stopped. The footsteps stopped. Everything stopped. Complete silence. I left the island the next morning.
I didn't mention the second light, didn't mention the logbook entries, didn't mention the footsteps. The harbor master just nodded when I said the system was stable. That was 6 months ago. Last week, I checked the maritime bulletin out of curiosity. Mariners are still reporting the lighthouse behaving strangely. The beam still fixes itself at 12:07 a.m., pointing north every night, even during storms, even when power is cut remotely, and sometimes, very rarely, ships report seeing a second light in the water, standing perfectly still, waiting, exactly where the beam ends.